Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to this episode of the Bulldog Hour, episode 3-6. I am one of your hosts, Joe Mays, and sitting next to me, my co-host, Justin Raffoff.
Yeah, it's good to be here. You know, it's been a couple weeks, and we're still getting in the swing of these live shows, but tonight should be a fun one.
Yeah, for sure. Mostly because, well, we're broadcasting after 2 Wilson victories.
Yeah, maybe not so much on the air. I don't really remember, but certainly came up a number of times before with the two of us about our scheduling of these games and just kind of the way things had worked out. But there was still plenty to break down and plenty to talk about. But all else being equal, it's a lot more fun to get on here after back-to-back wins.
Yes, it makes it a lot easier to not have to react to people overreacting from a loss to two teams that are very, very good this year, in Mifflin and Central Dauphin, who just beat Cumberland Valley 20-14. And Cumberland Valley was the team I thought that was probably the best after the first 4 weeks in District 3 at the 6A level.
Yeah, and it was funny because you and I had been talking a lot before, pretty much since we started talking high school football this year. That Mid-Penn conference, and specifically that top division, is just absolutely brutal. And I'm not sure anyone comes out of there with less than 2 losses, especially if any of them have a non-league loss, like Central Dauphin has to Manheim Township. It's just, that's going to be insane, round robin.
At least the teams that we would have to deal with, because
right.
We don't have to deal with Harrisburg. We don't play them in the regular season, and they're a 5A school. We don't have to deal with State College, at least not in the District 3 playoffs.
Right.
They're in the Mid-Penn, but we wouldn't have to face them until the state Final Four.
Right.
So the teams that we could see, Central Dauphin, again, Cumberland Valley, CD East, Carlisle, they're all going to beat each other up, as they have already started to do. And now we see Central Dauphin, who I think, we're in agreement that, at least historically, the Rams were down a little bit this year. That wasn't a typical Central Dauphin team. That was the expectation. Talking to people from the Mid-Penn, talking to people who are very in tune with, that Central Dauphin team and kind of what their expectation was for that team, just being able to look at what their expectations were, maybe not expectations, but what their realistic kind of outlook was for the season. So far, I would say they were a little worried at the start with the loss to Manheim Township, but they've got things rolling right now, and that was a huge win for them against Cumberland Valley. For sure. So that's all we're really going to talk about outside of Wilson for this evening, but we do have a lot to talk about. And it is nice to feel like we're back to normal. 2 wins in between our last show. And we're going to recap both of them, the victory versus Warwick and then at McCaskey just a few nights ago. But before we do that, a little bit of housekeeping and things we want to make you aware of or remind you of. And that is how to follow and interact. And we want to thank our sponsors. So be sure to check us out at facebook.com/Bulldog Hour, and the quote-unquote official Wilson football page is on facebook.com/Wilson Bulldogs football. You can also follow 4 accounts on Twitter, at Bulldog Hour, at Wilson Bulldogs, at Coach Joe Mays for me, and at Mr._Raffoff for Justin. And then on Instagram for game photos, player of the games, reminders, all that good stuff. Make sure you follow at Bulldog Hour and at Wilson Bulldogs football. And if you want to find an archive of the Bulldog Hour episodes, make sure you go to youtube.com/user/Joe Mays and J-Raff Show. If those aren't ways you find particularly appealing to interact with us, you can do so by leaving a comment during our live broadcast on Facebook, or you can go old-fashioned and just email us, show@bulldoghour.com or joe@bulldoghour.com. You can also find a contact form on bulldoghour.com. So basically, if you go to the website, there's plenty of ways that you can get in contact with us.
Yeah, if you can manage to find your way to the website, you will absolutely find your way to be able to be in contact with us.
For sure.
Or look for us at every Wilson football game.
Yeah, every single one. You'll find me with a camera and Justin up higher with a video camera.
Yeah, just kind of, looking down from above. So
we wear our apparel too, our Bulldog Hour stuff.
Yeah,
So if you ever have a question, comment, or suggestion, definitely hit us up. I've been told that we're approachable. I hope that's true.
I would believe so.
All right, good. We want to thank our sponsors again, May's Sandwich Shop, who's been with us from the start. Our anonymous donor and everyone that has donated in the past. And we actually had a new donor just this past Friday night. Wilson alum Matt Cruz was kind enough to monetarily support the show, and we greatly appreciate his donation, and we are very thankful for him and people like him that have helped us to hopefully grow the show, make it bigger and better. Remember, the live shows are every other week on Facebook. The next show will be following week 7, which will be Sunday, October 15th. And I mentioned supporting us, and it's not just monetary-wise in-kind donations. We also offer sponsorships and advertising opportunities. But like Justin always says, the most important thing you could do, besides visit BulldogHour.com, is spread the word.
Like and share. I know I got word of someone following the live stream and the updates from the sideline. I got word on Saturday morning that they simply did it because it was liked and shared, and they saw it pop up on their feed.
Yes.
And so that's how they found out about it. So
please do so.
Like and share, and that'll just help bring bigger and better things.
Yeah, and if you aren't aware, Justin and I are the ones that do all the stuff on all the social accounts. Anything that comes there comes from me or Justin pinch hits from time to time. So all that stuff...
Nervously, I pinch hit.
All that stuff comes from us running the Bulldog Hour. So if you enjoy the Wilson Bulldogs football Facebook page and all those accounts, those are us. And those live streams that we've been doing and have been very, very well received, that's through us as well. So if you support the Bulldog Hour, you're supporting bigger and better things through the official, again, quote-unquote, official Wilson football Facebook page.
Official in our hearts.
Yes. All right, so quick look at the schedule again. So we're in that middle column. The top 2 are over. Here we are, October 1st. Welcome to October. And we're going to talk about Warwick and McCaskey and then preview Penn Manor and Lebanon. All right, so that takes care of the business. And we're going to move on to our game previews now. The first one up, Warwick. Home game, second straight after falling to Central Dauphin. Wilson stayed at home on September 22nd. It was a big night. I believe it was a youth night where they welcomed all the young Bulldog football players to the field. The cheerleader camp kids were there, and it was a raucous atmosphere. Also because we welcomed back through the Wilson Football Tradition Club 3 previous Wilson Championship teams, and not just 3 previous ones, but the first 3 Wilson Championship teams from 1950, 1967, and 1969. So a very cool crowd on hand from new Bulldogs to the old, and they got to see quite a game. Both times now that the Tradition Club has honored past teams, they've seen a thrilling game. Last year against Manheim Township in the 17-10 victory right down to the buzzer. And now this year against Warwick, Wilson opens league play and gets their 65th straight victory against LL Section1 teams. While it looks a little bit more lopsided, it definitely felt a lot closer and not quite in hand as the final score would indicate. Wilson won 56-24.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree. It was quite the show. Basically a week and a half ago, almost on the 22nd against Warwick. I can speak from my sources that were recognized on one of those championship teams that they were blown away. I'm pretty sure, if you don't know what I'm talking about, my uncle was on one of the championship teams, was recognized. I am pretty sure he had not been back to a game at Wilson since the late 60s. And so for he and his wife who came along, completely blown away in every aspect. They said the number of people, the size of the stands, the game itself, and everything that kind of went into the spectacle that is a Wilson home game, and specifically a big Wilson home game. You know, not to downplay the game. You know, there were lots of other things going on, but the game was a big one, and it despite the score kind of being, like you said, a little lopsided at the end, the game did not really play out that way. It was much closer, or at least it seemed much closer than what the score would indicate, and that I think kind of helped add to the buzz in the stadium.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, it was a great atmosphere, a great night to be a Bulldog, and Wilson got the big victory. I know one that people were circling on the calendar, and really 3rd out of 4. We heard the kids mention, preseason that they would look forward to Mifflin, Central Dauphin, Manheim Township, and Warwick. So we're already through 3 of those 4 big ones with Township on the horizon in a few weeks. But the Warwick one was had a lot of drama surrounding it. One, because, they played them so well last year down in Lidditz.
Yeah, it came down to a Hail Mary last year.
And they had so many of those kids back. Yeah. Really, really talented athletes at Warwick, which we know they had struggled a little bit a few years ago, and each of the teams has an ebb and flow, and Warwick is on the upswing.
Yes.
And obviously, we can't overlook that former Wilson quarterback Grayson Klein it started going to Warwick over the summer, so that familiarity there and that competitor spirit and wanting to play your best against a former teammate, someone who you've known for a long time. So the players and coaches from both sides definitely amped for this one. But before we talk any more about the game, let's take a look at some of the highlights from Wilson's 56-24 victory over Warwick. All right, so the game took place on September 22nd in West Lawn. It was a beautiful, beautiful night. You really couldn't ask for much better weather compared to what we had for the Tradition Club event last year when it was rainy. But things started off pretty good for Wilson. They held Warwick, forced a punt. They partially blocked it. And then I'm not really sure what ended up happening here, but Warwick got the ball, because I guess they say across the line. They said
across the line of scrimmage, and Wilson touched it, and so then it was lost possession by Wilson. If it doesn't cross the line of scrimmage, then Wilson could touch it, and it still, I don't believe it would matter. But because they said it crossed by basically half a yard.
So not a lot of scoring in the first half, especially in the first quarter. And right there you saw 2 sacks on Grayson Klein by the Wilson defense. And now we're going to start to see the offenses take control here in the second quarter. A nice little swing pass from Uric to Reynoso gets Wilson down into Warwick territory. And on this next play, Iggy Reynoso will take the ball up the gut and score the first of 5 rushing touchdowns he'll have on the night. And I believe I had a photo of that one.
That's an awesome picture.
Now,
that was pretty cool.
I believe on Warwick's next series, they snapped the ball over their punter's head. He still tried to get a kickoff, but it was a low kick that landed near the 20, and then is fielded by Sean McAndrew, who gets it back to where the ball bounced. Unfortunately for the Bulldogs, the very next play would be an interception right near the goal line, which would end the threat for the Bulldogs to score and up their lead. And Warwick, led by Klein, would drive down the field and get one of their own. So, we're thinking, oh man, we got some momentum. Well, we lose it.
Momentum gone.
The next series, though, who do we give the ball to?
Iggy Reynoso.
Up the middle and gone. I think it was 72 yards. He takes that one to the house, and suddenly Wilson's back up on top quickly, 14-7. And they wouldn't be done. Neither team would be done, actually.
No.
We're going to see here, though, a quick throw out is intercepted by senior cornerback Trevor Tenga. Wilson gets the ball again, and just a few plays after that, Wilson's going to give the ball once again to Mr. Reynoso, who's going to do his job and get outside and cross the goal line once again for his 3rd touchdown of the second quarter, and Wilson would go up 21-7. But Grayson Klein led his Warwick Warriors down the field and scrambled himself and got into the end zone to cut the Bulldogs' lead to a touchdown once again. Thankfully, Wilson wasn't done in the second quarter. It was a really busy second quarter.
Yeah. For the first quarter ended 0-0.
Here we get to see a freshman phenom, Troy Corson, take a little slip screen. 43 yards for the score just before halftime. I believe there's about 90 seconds or 2 minutes or so left in the first half when he got the score. Now Warwick would start to threaten again, get into Wilson territory, but on the last play of the first half, Cameron Magalotti, beautifully positioned, picks off the Grayson Klein throw and is eventually tackled back near the line of scrimmage, and that's how the first half would end. Got a picture of the members of those Tradition Club teams back at halftime. Now the Warriors would add on a field goal early in the third quarter and cut the Wilson lead to 28-17. On the very next play, though, the Wilson kickoff team would show us what they're meant to do, and Abdul McFoy takes the kickoff to the house to give Wilson much more comfortable position to be in, up 35-17. But Warwick wasn't done yet. Another nice pitch and catch.
That's a great catch.
Incredible
great
catch.
Throw. That's a great throw.
That's a great all-around play.
Man.
Now it's 35-24. However, Wilson would drive down the field one more time. Iggy again, 42-24. And he just would waltz into the end zone for that one. Now we get to see another sack. The Bulldogs defense was flying around all night. While they couldn't always stop him in the secondary, they were able to get him a couple of sacks. Here, finally, we'll get to see Iggy's last touchdown as he dives across the goal line, and I got a picture of that one, too. I guarantee you that.
Oh, man.
So, 49-24, and this is the one that immediately after it happened, there was a little bit of a controversy surrounding it. But I think, as you could see there, that unfortunately on this play, Grayson Klein was injured. And we'll talk about that and that play a little bit more after we finish here. After Grayson got injured, the Warwick backup quarterback came in, and a few plays later, Nick Johnson stepped in front of his pass and went like 75 yards for the touchdown. That's where we get our final score, 56-24. Wilson in victory formation. They get their 65th straight LL1 victory. There's your final score. And a weird error there from you on the camera.
That was end zone camera.
Oh, yeah, sure. Blame them. I got it. So there you have it. That is Week 4, the highlights from Week 4. And, the win is the most important thing for the Bulldogs, but they didn't want to see what happened to their former teammate Grayson Klein there near the end. We saw it on the video. It was the camera was kind of leaving as Justin was supposed to do, track the ball. So you kind of saw it in the corner, but Trevor Hatley was rolling out as Grayson rolled out, and while Grayson threw the ball, Trevor jumped to try to bat it down, and he landed into Grayson.
Right.
While at least Eddie Ortiz was also behind there. And the impact of the players resulted in Grayson tearing at least his patellar tendon in his knee. I've also heard that there might be other ligament damage, and he's looking at recovery time of at least 6 months, if not a year plus, due to that. And some people, I don't know where this is coming from, because a lot of people were jumping to the defense, including Paul Roberts from WEU, saying that there was no ill will there. There were some people hyping up that the Wilson players don't like Grayson, which I'm not really sure where that came from. Maybe it's just people thinking, oh, he used to play there and doesn't play there. Now he plays for a rival. Yeah. I don't know where that came from, because, and a lot of media places covered this, and some actually shared video. The entire Wilson team walked over to Grayson after the game to, wish him well. Yeah. And he and Trevor were pretty close. Yeah. And Grayson has come out and said on Twitter, for the people that were questioning it, that it was football. He's like, there was obviously no intent there. No one was trying to injure anyone. Right. It's just the game of football.
Yeah, and like you said, it's unfortunate. I hope things do obviously there's an injury, but I hope the recovery can be on the quicker end, and things can get rolling there for Grayson, sooner rather than later. But back to the Wilson side of things, this was a big game. We talked about through the first 3 games looking to build and see more consistency, and while it wasn't as far from a perfect output, there was a lot more consistency in a lot of ways in that game than there were in the previous 3. Where we look at Mifflin, where there was a strong showing for a short period of time, and then there was a stronger showing against Springford, but again, too many lapses, and then again, kind of a relapse in the Central Dauphin game, where lots of moments where you're just not quite there, and then a furious rally that just falls short. You didn't see that in the Warwick game. The team was ready to go, and they were ready to compete from the start, and that showed in the outcome. They got things going. Much had been made. You talked about other people, and some of the write-ups and news stories and things about Wilson struggling to run the ball. They were certainly able to run it against Warwick, and as you said, and we'll get to some of the specifics here in just a second, but Iggy certainly put on a show.
Oh, definitely, yeah. Let's talk about some of the team stats. Wilson had 18 first downs. Warwick managed 25. Rushing yards, Wilson 303. A lot of those coming from Iggy. We'll get to that in a second. Warwick had 97, so just a shade under 100. Passing yards, Wilson 119, but Grayson and who took over for him ended up combining for 347 passing yards. And Warwick outgained Wilson 422 to 444. Aided by having the advantage in time of possession, over 26.5 minutes for the Warriors, where Wilson had 21 and a quarter. Third downs, Wilson respectable, 3 for 7. You'd like to see that at 4 or 5. Be above the 50% mark. But Warwick was just 4 of 17. So defense bent at times, but when they needed to step up, they were able to do so. Wilson didn't attempt any 4th down conversions, and Warwick converted on 2 of their 5. Another aspect that Wilson needed some improvement in, and we'll see that when we talk about McCaskey. They missed out on 1 red zone opportunity. We saw the interception, but Warwick was a perfect 2 for 2. The other thing that stands out from this game is the penalties. The refs like to throw the yellow flag that night. Wilson had 12 accepted penalties for 143 yards.
That's crazy.
Warwick didn't fare all that much better. They had 10 accepted penalties for 99 yards.
Right.
So 22 accepted penalties for nearly 250 yards.
Yeah, that's definitely something that, like you mentioned, in this game we were able to overcome those things and specifically pull away later. But, it's one of those where you're going to need to clean those up, especially, sometimes they happen and it's not that big of a deal. You're able to overcome it, but in a close game, you have that many penalties, and it's more likely to really hurt you and keep you from getting the outcome you want.
Individual accolades, talking about some of the stats. Senior quarterback Connor Jurg was 7 of 9, very efficient for 119 yards and a touchdown. He also had 5 rushes for 24 yards. Iggy, the man of the night, 26 carries for 272 yards and 5 touchdowns. He also had 3 catches for 47 yards. The other running back, Abdul McFoy, had 2 rushes for 6 yards, a reception for 13 yards, but he returned 4 kickoffs for 132 yards and the touchdown that we saw in the highlights. Senior receiver Alex Rydell had 2 catches for 16 yards, and freshman receiver and safety Troy Corson had the touchdown catch of 43 yards. He also contributed 5 tackles and a pass breakup. A solid debut for the freshman. Trevor Tanga, 7 tackles and an interception from his defensive back spot. And Nick Johnson, the previous week's player of the game, just had 6 tackles, one of them for loss being the sack, and that interception, that pick 6, which Mike Draco said that should that be a Nick 6?
Yeah, I
so
saw that.
A little shout out to the Red and Eagles, Mike Draco, for that nice little pun as soon as I tweeted that out. And Eddie Ortiz, 5 tackles, 2.5 for loss, and 2 of them being sacks. So all around, pretty solid performance. Got a little bit beat up. Some kids are nicked up in the secondary. Matt Fry didn't play this week after being injured against Warwick. Regal. Isaiah Gilmore, who got hurt against Central Dauphin, didn't play against Warwick, was dressed for McCaskey but didn't play. So hopefully we're going to see those guys coming back and getting ready to play. And also we may be getting the debut of junior safety Joey Fox in the next few weeks. He was injured in the off season, but I know is very excited to get going and back on the field, hopefully in the coming weeks. So, since we did have the win, Wilson got the W, we do have an interview, and after the victory over Warwick, we caught up with offensive lineman Chris Price and Wyatt Schonauer. All right, joining us post-game after their victory over Warwick, 56-24, are offensive and defensive linemen Chris Price and Wyatt Schonauer. Guys, congratulations on the big victory, especially one coming to start league play, which we all know means that one of the streaks continues. Just so happened to be worn by Mr. Wyatt Schonauer. That 65's never looked better on you.
Oh, thank you.
So, guys, what was the mindset going into this game?
Execute the game plan. And if you execute the game plan, everything handles itself. I mean,
good things happen.
We know, obviously, drama into the game with Grayson and whatnot, but we had to do what we had to do to make sure that we got the win, and that included just executing the game plan.
So, was there anything specific that the coaches hammered in during the week on offense and defense? Was it we want to pound the ball? You know, what was the game plan?
Offensively, it's just we need to work on a running game. We have struggled with that the past 3 games. We just wanted to. That's what we pushed during practice, just to work on the running game. Yeah.
Well, it seems to have worked. I have the stats here. If I can quick pull them up here. Net yards rushing 303. So yeah, I think Coach Brubaker should be pretty happy with those results.
Yeah, I hope.
Iggy had a big night on the ground, but obviously, and I know he credits you all the time, he's not going anywhere without you guys. Keller, Drake, right, Mikey Klein, and in the past we saw John Ventura the first few games. So you guys are starting to hit a flow, which is great, starting league play. You know, McCaskey next week, another big one. But let's stay here defensively. What was the mindset going in defensively?
We knew that they had a really great passing game. Grayson has an arm, and there's no denying that, so he's going to be able to sling that ball wherever he wants to. So our main objective was to solidify the secondary, because we blew a couple coverages last week and the week before that and the week before that. So our plan was to shut them down up front, which we've been doing a pretty good job of these past couple of weeks. But just to get a good rush on them, get some hurry-ups, and just try and disrupt the pass as much as we can.
Now, it was a rough start to the year, 1-2 after the first 3 weeks, 2 close losses to Mifflin and Central Dauphin. Looked like you guys had a little bit more energy tonight. Looked like you guys were on a mission.
Yeah.
Always good to see. So, looking ahead now, McCaskey next week, and then you're back home for 2 with Penn Manor and Lebanon. And what does it mean to continue to get into league play firing on all cylinders like this?
It's just
Well, after these past couple 3 weeks have been hell. I mean, it's not necessarily the best thing to go through when you go through 2 losses and you only have 1 win. It doesn't look good on paper, and it eats at you when you lose to Mifflin, which you're used to getting every year, and Central Dauphin, which we've yet to beat. And I mean, that's a tough pill to swallow. So I mean, we obviously with Grayson and whatnot, that gave some more people a bit more motivation, but we knew that in order to be successful throughout all 4 quarters of the game, that we had to bring some more energy to the field, and it was clearly shown with our secondary. I mean, anytime, even a block away or anything, something small, we're getting hype over it. So, I mean, that's huge in terms of the game. I mean, momentum and energy can change the game.
All right, well, thanks for joining us, guys. I know you want to get in, get some food. You're tired. Long game after 10 o'clock when this is over. That's crazy. So we look forward to talking to you hopefully after the McCaskey game next week, and hopefully I'm taking a picture of another jersey as well.
Yep.
All right, congratulations. Thanks, guys.
All right, thank you, guys.
All right, so thanks to Chris Price and Wyatt Schonauer for joining us after the win over Warwick. All right, we didn't get to grab him and talk to him after the game, But we do want to mention who our Week 4 player of the game was, and I think it's got to be pretty obvious who it's going to be.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it has to be Iggy, just because when you put up those numbers,
right,
you got to be the player of the game.
So you see almost on a weekly basis in high school football, there's a guy somewhere who's going to average over 10 yards a carry. And usually they have like 8 or 9 touches, right? Maybe 10 to 15 touches. To do that against a team, that was blowing teams out all year. We talked about that in the preview a little bit. But to have 26 carries and still average basically 10.5 yards a carry, that's insane. Wow. Yeah, heck of a game, Iggy.
And 5 touchdowns, It's
to top it off.
Yeah, that's just...
and then he added almost 50 more on 3 receptions.
So quite the game for him. We haven't gotten to talk to him yet during the season. When we talked to him preseason.
There's usually a line.
But yeah, there's usually a lot of people that want to talk to him. So we're like, we'll grab you at some point. But we're thankful for the guys that have taken time out to talk to us. All right, Week 5, just a few nights ago, Wilson went down to Lancaster to take on the J.P. McCaskey Red Tornado. And thankfully for Wilson, as we kind of alluded to at the beginning of the show, talking after 2 victories, the Bulldogs came out on top. Maybe not as big of a win as people wanted or expected, depending on where you fall on that. But, hey, a win is a win. We'll take it, especially on the road, on teams that are always gunning for you and giving Wilson their best shot. The Bulldogs came out on top, defeating the Red Tornadoes 33-7. Now, things got a little bit interesting at the very beginning of the game.
Yeah, immediately.
Literally 2 minutes. Game time, I think, had elapsed.
Yeah.
And Wilson was losing.
Yeah.
So a little bit of a shock there.
Well, and all that goes to show, and we noticed, and lots of people noticed, that for the most part, people expected Wilson to win this game. But in the Lancaster paper, there was a writer who went out on a limb, and he admittedly went out on a limb. Like, he wasn't saying, he was shocked that Wilson won. But, he felt that
he went for it.
That McCaskey had what it takes to pull off the upset. They have enough big play capability.
Wilson's coming off an emotional high against Warwick.
You're going on the road.
Secondary's beat up a little.
Right.
Playing on grass.
Won't be nearly the atmosphere that you generally play for. It's just there were lots of factors, and 2 minutes into the game, you're like, maybe. You could see where he was coming from. Right. Not that, oh my gosh, this is awful. It's over.
Stop McCaskey, though. The first defensive series, Wilson couldn't stop them.
They marched right down the field.
4 plays. They had 2 big passing plays, which we'll see when we get to the highlights. Then they stopped him, I think, might have been an incompletion, and then a touchdown. And all of a sudden, Wilson's down 7-0.
Right.
And you're like, oh, that's not a great start.
So thankfully they were able to get it together from there.
Yes.
But you could see some of those things that you're going to get when you play McCaskey, where if you're not playing your assignment, you're not doing your job, you're going to open yourself up to the big play, and that happened immediately a couple times. Yep. So thankfully they were able to straighten it out and get on track. And like you said, it wasn't necessarily the dominant thing that some people are looking for, but you know what? They were able to do some things, work on some things. And still have plenty to work on, but they were able to kind of get out of there with a win. And you go on the road, get a win, that, you just kind of move on.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, let's take a look at the game versus McCaskey, some of the highlights from Huddle. Down in Lancaster, Wilson on the road again. And like I mentioned, McCaskey came out firing, ready to go. They had a nice first down completion, then second down went all the way down to the Wilson 1-yard line, where when McCaskey would, I think 2 plays later, get the ball into the end zone right here. He got lit up, but held on. Now, we would see Wilson get the ball back. A little preview there, as my photos are out of order because I love Huddle. But here we get Iggy off on the sideline, picking up a nice gain on Wilson's first drive. And we would see him punch it in here for the Bulldogs to tie the game at 7. So now you're thinking, okay, that's a little bit better, offensive answer. Wilson would stop McCaskey on D, and Iggy would get the rock again and get Wilson into the red zone another time. Wilson would go to the air, though, for their second touchdown, where Connor Jurg hits a wide-open Sean McAndrew just standing in the back of the end zone for the score, and Wilson would go up 14-7 at the end of the first quarter. Now,
made your way into the highlights there, by the way.
I did, you're right. Now we get to see, for the second week in a row, Cameron Magalotti with the interception. But this time, surprisingly, he's got the wheels to get through the defenders and into the end zone for the pick six. Second straight week for a defensive touchdown from the Bulldogs. And I was, of course, on the other end of the field, but that's how it goes sometimes. Now, Wilson would miss the extra point here, a little bit wide left, so the score would be 20-7. And Wilson had a couple of issues in the red zone. A couple of turnovers on down.
Safety, by the way. Really close.
They got close a couple times for sacks. There we got freshman Jeff Colson chasing him, Eddie Ortiz and Nick Johnson forcing some pressure. We're approaching halftime here. Another sack from the Wilson defense. That time Chris Price flying through. And this attempt here right before half is a failed hook and lateral that almost worked, because if that would have gotten there was a lot of room on that sideline. But
that he would have hit on a dead sprint.
Yeah.
So
halftime 20-7 favor Wilson, and they would come out firing with a lucky tipped ball to Iggy on the reception that time, and Wilson would be in business again, driving down the field, hoping to get their fourth score. And Iggy would set them up here with another nice run to the outside. And I believe he's going to... Oh, nope. Wilson, again, that was another turnover on downs there as they got towards the red zone. But Nick Johnson flies through on the next possession after turning over down, gets the quarterback sack. That was on second down. They incomplete pass on third. Another bad punt from McCaskey results in Wilson getting the ball early. They struggle in the red zone, but do get the field goal from Frankie Cox. That was the first one he's made this year. It's only his second attempt, so it was nice to get that one done. Wilson stopped McCaskey, got the ball back, and then Iggy led the team down to the red zone once again. Wilson stalled inside, though, and went to Cox again, and he got his second field goal of the game.
Shot. It looks like he kicked a spiral.
Now we're going to see a strip sack here by Eddie Ortiz, picked up by Nick Johnson running down the sideline. And he'll set up Wilson's final score as it's 26-7 after those two Cox field goals. Eventually, Wilson would get inside the 5 and hand it off to Abdul McFoy, who would take it in from the 1. The extra point was good, and Wilson gets to 33-7, which is where the game would eventually end. I have no idea what this play is. Another sack. Great. Love it. There we go. There it is. So Eddie Ortiz with another sack there. And the game ends 33-7. All right. So, a win is a win. I love it. A little bit of a shaky start, but, still got some young kids stepping up and looking good. And the seniors starting to play as a strong unit as well. Improved to 3-2, more importantly 2-0 in the league, and stretched that LL Section1 winning streak to 66 games.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it really is.
I know we bring that up a lot. The numbers, when you start talking about some of the streaks, are just absurd. But like you said, this is one of those where, when you win 66 straight league games, you're going to have something like this, where not everything was clicking all the way, but you know what? They were just off on a number of plays, and whether that's the emotions from one week to another, or whether that's the injuries from one week to another, or whether that's just, sometimes you're just off, or whatever it is, you have to hope that you can do enough to make it through those games, and on Friday night they did, and that's a key. So the ability to do enough, and when we say do enough, they won by 26. They gave up a touchdown 2 minutes into the game, and
nothing else.
Right. So you can't. Well, in that aspect, they made adjustments and did so quickly, and that's good. But, like you said, lots of guys are getting valuable experience. You're starting to see some of that growth and some of those things that we kept preaching in our first few episodes, about kind of just like keeping the course and some of the reasons for optimism and things like that. You're starting to see some of those start to develop, and the key is to not just start settling because you're winning the games like Warwick and McCaskey. We talk about this all the time. You got to keep getting better week to week, and that's been the trademark of Wilson teams every year. And if this team wants to continue to be successful and continue to have these types of wins, they need to keep getting better. So
for sure,
hit week 5. That's halfway through the regular season.
Yeah,
they're you hope it's not halfway mark of the season. But time will tell, I guess. Right?
You're given 10 games,
right.
And what you do with them will determine if you get the potential to play 5 more.
Right.
And Wilson right now 3-2, but getting better week in, week out. They got better. I mean, you could see them getting better during the Mifflin game.
Yeah.
Better all-around performance against Springford, still not the best. Same
right.
thing with Central Dauphin. They waited too late to turn up the intensity, but then you saw them come out the way they should against Warwick. Still some issues, obviously. But now against McCaskey, the issues were early and then they ended it.
Right.
So they're starting to build something, and this team is getting better and better. And now they've got 2 more league games at home coming up, which we'll talk to momentarily. But first, we did catch up with a couple more players after the win at McCaskey. So let's take a listen to Cameron Magalotti and Troy Corson. All right, we're here post-game with defensive players Cameron Magalotti and Troy Corson. Guys, you had a big night tonight, both team and individually. Troy, you led the team in tackles. Tied with Angel, 5.5. Good showing for you, a pass breakup as well. We saw you flying around on special teams. And Magalotti, well, we got a little highlight action from you, a little pick 6. Why don't you walk us through that play? Did you see something on film that gave it away, or is it just a reaction on the field?
Well, I had to get my flat first, and then I was like watching the QB's eye, threw it right to me, and it just made things happen.
I didn't realize you were that fast.
I guess I am. I couldn't even keep up with you in that.
So, guys, a good defensive effort. I know people little jittery at the beginning. They drove down the field, got that quick score. Obviously, finishing with the score 33-7. You didn't give up any more points. What were the adjustments after they kind of came up and took it to you right away? What did the coaching staff have to say?
Well, at halftime, we brought the heat a lot more. We were not slowing down. We were covering up a little tighter, and we were just playing Wilson football.
Also, we sharpened up on the mental game. Like the first one was a mental breakdown, so we sharpened up, and then we were fine for the rest of the game.
Now, you guys have been dealing with a lot of injuries in the secondary. What has been the mentality knowing that you could get called at any moment?
You gotta be ready to practice. Yeah, you gotta keep working hard.
Because you could be 4th string 1 week, next week you'll be starting.
Troy, what has it meant to you to be able to come back after an early season, not being able to play, and now being thrust into the lineup now 2 weeks in a row, getting a start as a freshman?
Awesome feeling. It's great getting to be out there in the field. I was dreaming about it last year also. Sitting here watching everybody play up here. Dream come true.
And now, Magalotti, you bounced around a little bit position to position. Do you feel at home now where they got you?
I don't really care where I'm at, as long as I help the team. So as long as I'm doing my job, helping the team, getting some win, it doesn't really matter where I play.
Now, a lot of the Twitter followers really love the picture from a few weeks ago of the team in the crop top. So why don't you give everyone a little background on what it is about that? Why do you wear them? What's the reasoning behind it?
Well, going into the school year, I said I'm just gonna start wearing crop top because it makes me understand that I need to just work more and just keep pushing myself to the weight room. And I got everyone else to do it, so now it's like a team motto.
Yeah, everyone definitely enjoyed it. I like getting that picture. Anonymous sender sent that to me and had me post it. So, well, guys, another great win, 66 straight in the league. Got 2 more at home now in a row with Penn Manor next week, followed by Lebanon. And we look forward to seeing you guys back in action at Gurski next week. So thanks for joining us, guys.
Thank you. Have a nice night.
All right, so there was our interview with defensive stars at McCaskey, Cameron Magalotti, who had the pick 6, Troy Corson, who tied for the team lead in tackles at 5.5 with Angel Martinez, and a lot of fun to talk to those guys. they were in demand as well. Also, I believe Magalotti was giving an interview to the Lancaster newspaper writer there. So we snagged him. Actually, I had asked him first, and then we were looking for Corson, and then in that meantime, someone else came over and was like, "Hey, let's talk about that play." It was a cool play. It was a really cool 60-plus yard pick six.
Yeah.
You know, he's only been one up by Nick Johnson the week before with that 75-yarder. So, yeah, very cool all around, and a good effort by the Bulldogs to defeat McCaskey. Let's take a look, or let's talk about a little bit about the team statistics here. You know, we talked about Wilson had issues right from the start on defense, but after that series, the defense played pretty well. Yeah, first downs, Wilson got 17, pretty good. McCaskey had just 8, and
of which at least 3 were on that first series, right? Or 2, maybe.
2,
I guess.
yeah, I think 2.
Yeah,
so they had 6 the rest of the game. They essentially had not even 2 per quarter.
Right.
So after that first drive, rushing yards, Wilson, very nice, 235. McCaskey, -6.
Yeah.
Negative rushing yards. Now, obviously, the sacks are included in that.
Right.
But still,
they were getting after the quarterback.
Yeah. They were harassing him all night long. We saw Eddie Ortiz, Chris Price, Nick Johnson. They were all in there. I'm not sure if they got those guys got sacks, but I know Trevor Hatley was in the backfield on occasion. A lot of nice pressure from the ends, linebackers, and any other people they sent on blitzes. Very good defensive effort. Gave up 181 passing yards. Wilson had just 102 in that department. Total yards, Wilson 337 to McCaskey's 175. And, well, maybe the reason McCaskey wasn't able to get much rushing yardage or first downs was because, well, they barely had the ball.
Right, yeah. Less than 15 minutes.
Less than 15 minutes. Wilson had the ball over 33 and a half minutes.
Yeah, it was almost basically it's a 70-30 split. You know, it was just under 75%, you know, which is basically a full quarter to 3 full quarters.
Yeah.
You know, that makes it hard to get a lot going.
It's crazy to think. During the game, it didn't feel that way. So when I saw these stats, I was like, wow. Wilson more than doubled up.
Wilson was very methodical. You know, there weren't as many of the huge plays, but they were very methodical. Well, like when I saw rush yards 235, I'm like, wow. You know, because I wouldn't have pegged it as that high, but when you think about it, when they had the ball for 70% of the time, you know, and they were running a lot. There were a lot of rushing attempts, which is good. You know, that's what they need to be able to do in a game like this, where, you know, you can grind it out, even when it didn't seem like quite everything was all clicking. I know we just read off the stats. If you read those stats, you would think, oh, it was clicking pretty well.
Yeah.
And it didn't
click methodical,
quite like you would expect to see, but it was very methodical, and they were able to get the job done.
3, 4, 5 yards here, then you get a 7 or 8 yard run, then you throw in, you know, the 12, 20, whatever, every so often. And the passing game was there when they needed it to be. Third down wise, Wilson struggled a bit this week. 4 for 11. McCaskey not much better at 3 for 10. Fourth downs, Wilson struggled there as well. We mentioned multiple turnover on downs. Wilson converted just 1 of 4, but McCaskey, the defense shut them out, didn't get 1 of their 3 attempts. And I talked about the red zone in the Warwick game where they failed on that 1. Wilson also failed on 2 attempts inside the red zone against McCaskey. 5 of 7 for Wilson. So you can tell those drives were not big hitters like we saw against Warwick, where we had multiple touchdowns of outside of the 20. At McCaskey, 7 attempts inside the 20. Wilson converts on 5, and McCaskey was 1 of 1 on that first drive of the game. Individual stats, Connor Yerg, 14 of 19 for 102 yards and a touchdown, that one to McAndrew that we saw. He also had 6 rushes for 16 yards. Iggy, another solid week from him. 25 rushes for 192 yards and a score. He also chipped in 6 catches for 39 yards. You know, most of the time you'd expect someone who rushes for nearly 200 yards to be the player of the game. Yeah. But, you know, he probably could be the player of the game every week if we really wanted to get down to it. The stats he's put up, especially in weeks 2, 4, and 5 now, he could be the guy when you're looking at it from that aspect.
The wins.
yeah, it's true.
Well, so it pretty much goes to show if Iggy can get going, it usually is good things for the team.
Yeah, time will tell if that's correlation or causation, but for now it's looking pretty good. But Iggy will not be our player of the week. Just a little tease there. Abdul McFoy chipped in 7 rushes for 30 yards and a score. Talked about Sean McAndrew. He had 2 catches for 22 yards and a score. On defense, I already mentioned this in the interview, but Angel Martinez filling in at defensive back, and Troy Corson starting at safety. Both had 5.5 tackles, and Troy had a pass breakup again. Nick Johnson, heard his name a lot on defense. 4 tackles, 1.5 for loss, including that 1 sack we saw, and he recovered 2 fumbles from McCaskey. 1 right before halftime on the failed hook and lateral, and then another after the Ortiz sack. Johnson picked that one up and rumbled a few yards before being pushed out of bounds. Cameron Magalotti, that big one was the interception, the pick 6 for the touchdown, over 60 yards. He also had a sack, that being his tackle and a tackle for a loss. And senior kicker Frankie Cox nailed his 2 field goal attempts, his first 2 made this year from 21 and 20 yards. So, well, we're going to go back into the player of the game archive and pull out a young man who was already the player of the game. And we mentioned that it's not Iggy, who's been the player of the game twice. So that leaves us with 2 players. And, you know, on the stat sheet, it might not stand out like nearly 200 yards rushing does. But the contributions from Nick Johnson go beyond what appears in ink.
Yeah.
You know, 4 tackles, nice. He had this tackle for a loss, the sack, recovered the 2 fumbles. But what I've been hearing from him before, during, and after the game is he's become a vocal leader for the team. Something that may have been missing earlier, that they needed to figure out who was their voice, who are they turning to. And there's a few seniors, obviously, that have stepped up as well, something you were waiting to hear. And I constantly see Chris Price in that role, but unfortunately for them, he was injured the first few weeks. So, you know, it's tough to be that vocal leader when you're not able to suit up with your teammates. But over the course of the first half of the season, junior tight end and inside linebacker Nick Johnson has kind of become that guy that they're turning to, or that is stepping up and saying what needs to be said, and then backing it up with his actions on the field.
Yeah, and, you know, I'm a little more removed from those things, but looking at it, you know, 2 fumble recoveries, you know, and somebody might be like, well, that's luck. You know what, that a lot of times that comes from hustle, you know, because somebody's punching the ball out and you're flying to the ball. So those are all positive signs, you know, and like you said, there's a number of guys we've really seen that development start to kind of come around on this team, and we hope, like we mentioned, we hope that continues through the next few weeks, and they continue to get better. But yeah, Nick did a great job, and it was kind of all over the place. So congrats to him.
All right, so that wraps up our game recaps from Warwick and McCaskey. We're going to move on to Week 6 now, coming up this Friday, October 6th. The Bulldogs will welcome the Penn Manor Comets to Gurski Stadium. And Penn Manor is sitting at 1-4. Not a great year for them to start. They opened up with 3 straight losses, hosting Cedar Cliff 27-6. They then lost at Lampeter-Strasburg 25-21, and then home against Dallestown 49-20. Their lone win came against Lebanon 35-20 in Week 4, and just this past week, Penn Manor fell to Hempfield at home 16-14. So they're close in a lot of these games. The only one out of reach was Dallestown. Cedar Cliff, pretty solid team. LS as well. So, you know, they're hanging around. They haven't been able to get over the hump, getting just the victory against Lebanon. But Penn Manor is a team that Wilson's familiar with, having previously played them 26 times. Unfortunately for the Comets, they've never beaten Wilson.
Right.
Wilson's a perfect 26-0, so this is the 27th all-time meeting this Friday, and the Penn Manor Comets will look to beat the Bulldogs for the first time in program history. Last year, Wilson went to Millersville and beat Penn Manor 42-13. That was on October 7th, 2016. It's tough to say much when a team has never beaten a program, because especially this Penn Manor team, because just 4 or 5 years ago they were Wilson's biggest challenger.
Yeah, and they had quite the program going. Year after year, they were kind of in. People talk all the time about how Wilson reloads and all that stuff, but that was really kind of seen at Penn Manor too for a few years there. They just seemed to keep getting better and better and push Wilson more and more, and there were some classic kind of matchups there that we had. Wilson was able to somehow find a way in each of those games, and while things have kind of swung away from that a little bit, I think we saw last year when we were at Penn Manor where, all right, the Wilson team should kind of be able to put this away, pretty easily, pretty early. And they were able to do a lot of things successfully. But, yeah, again, it was one of those games where they weren't able to kind of have the handle on it like you would expect. They gave up some big plays. They gave up, they didn't make some big plays.
Yeah.
There were just lots of things where you were used to seeing it out of Wilson and you didn't necessarily see it. So
Sure.
You hope, like, coming out of the McCaskey game, coming into this Penn Manor game, we mentioned while they were very methodical in the McCaskey game, that they weren't quite clicking on all cylinders. You hope to see some of those things start to be shored up and that the team does what they're supposed to do against Penn Manor.
Yeah, last
continue
year,
to get better.
Iggy rushed for almost 100 yards, but for 3 scores on the ground. Mason McElroy had a huge game in special teams.
Did he have 2 returns in that
He
game?
did.
Yeah.
And they also had some issues in the secondary, giving up both their scores were long touchdown passes. But Wilson came out on top 42-13, like they had the previous 25 times they played Penn Manor. Now here we are a year later, 27th all-time meeting versus the Comets takes place this Friday, 7 o'clock at Gurski. All right, now 2 weeks from now, Week 7. Crazy to think that we're already talking about Week 7. But Wilson will welcome the Lebanon Cedars to Gurski Stadiums on Friday the 13th of October.
Ooh.
Yeah. And Lebanon actually hasn't played at Wilson since 1999. So this is Lebanon's first trip to Gurski Stadium in nearly 2 decades. We talked last year that it was Wilson's first trip to Lebanon in nearly 2 decades, and they had actually lost the last time they went to Lebanon. And obviously we know last year Wilson played quite well offensively against the Cedars, beating Lebanon 68-19 on October 14th. That set the Wilson program record for points scored by a Wilson team at 68, and there was a huge write-up on scoring by Mike Drago in the paper the next day, talking about the points Wilson put up and the kind of revolution or renaissance of scoring that has happened over the last 10-15 years in high school football. And it listed the programs or the teams that have scored the most points in Burke County history. The ones that were like ridiculous in the 90s were all by Reading teams a long time ago. When you're talking about the beginning of high school football for some of these programs, like that long ago, like it was like, I don't remember if it was in the 20s or 30s. Like, it was a long time ago. But Wilson was in the top 10. That 68 points is top 10 in Burke's history, I believe. And the other more recent teams that were on there were those Why Missing Alex Anzalone teams. Yeah. When they were putting up 60s or 70s. I think Burke's Catholic might be touching on that as well.
They destroyed a lot of teams.
Yeah, they were very good in 2012. So Lebanon next Friday, the 13th, just under 2 weeks from now. This is the 30th all-time meeting between Wilson and Lebanon, and the Bulldogs hold the lead 24-5. The last Lebanon win I mentioned was September 25th, 1998. Surprised Cantafio's rookie season as coach. They beat the Bulldogs 20-7. Lebanon right now is sitting at 1-4. They lost the Cedar Bowl to Cedar Crest, 42-14 in Week 1. They rebounded and beat Ephrata, who has not won a game in a number of years now. They then have lost 3 straight games to Elizabethtown at Penn Manor, and they just they took a whooping from Warwick, who got some of their frustrations out, putting up once again 62 points. Warwick beat the Cedar 62-28.
Yeah, and that game drew some attention too, because as we mentioned, a new quarterback in for Warwick, and they didn't miss a beat.
No, they didn't.
And I can't think of the tight end's name.
Rucci.
But yeah. Is it Hayden?
Hayden Rucci,
yeah.
Hayden Rucci and Nick Fucci. Are like two of their big guys. With Carter
had
Forney
a huge. They were putting on a show, I think. So
yeah. So Lebanon, not a defensive powerhouse. However, they are very good offensively.
Yes,
and while some of the numbers don't show it, we saw it last year. Yeah, we saw it last year. Lebanon actually hosts Conestoga Valley this Friday, and then we'll see them on October 13th.
A couple D1 recruits in that game. So, don't be surprised if you have to be ready to go, because like we talked about against McCaskey, if you're not, they're going to march right down the field.
Right.
It's one of those where they've got enough talent and enough playmakers there, especially
their
at quarterback position.
Yeah, Salesman, he is electric.
Yeah, watching him last year, some of the plays he made.
Absolutely.
Wow.
Yeah. You can't sleep on them.
Just, generally speaking, I'm not saying, but they're kind of overmatched in Section 1 a lot of times, just in terms of numbers and all that stuff. You can see that when you look at their schedule when they play Section 2 teams or Section 3 teams, but when they're playing other sections, they're quite competitive, and that's that's kind of leading to things we've talked about.
We talked about the LL, kind of made the decision to drop Lebanon from Section 1 to Section 3 and Ephrata from Section 2 to Section 3 in order to give programs that may be larger in enrollment but aren't as competitive. So Section 3 will be 10 teams, Section 1 and 2 will be 6 teams, and Section 1 and 2 will have the intra-league action, which will have Wilson playing Manheim Central for the next 2 years, which we talked about during the preseason, and I asked Coach Doms about that in the preseason interview. So if you're interested in that, check out episode 3-2. All right, a couple milestones. We talked about it last week, and they came to fruition. Inside linebackers coach Matt Bender earned his 200th win as a Wilson assistant against Warwick, so now he's up to 201. And actually, Mike Drago ran with that and published it in the paper in the Red and Eagle on Thursday, and mentioned the blog that I run, that I try to put on stats and whatnot now at wilsonbulldogs.blogspot.com. I'm trying to kind of spruce that up a little bit and put it all on bulldoghour.com, but it's a work in progress because it's a lot. It's a lot of information that I'm trying to cram on there. So I'll keep you posted about that one. With the 2 victories over Warwick and McCaskey, offensive coordinator Jeremy Palm's up to 149 wins as an assistant, and Brandon Naples is up to 121. Coach Doms got his 132nd as head coach, and he needs just 20 more wins to pass John Gurski's record of 151.
Wow.
Maybe more impressive, and I believe we talked about this last time, but we'll say it again. Coach Doms is just 4 wins away from 400 with the program. He got 264 as an assistant, and he's up to the 132 as head coach. So he's sitting at 396. So, depending on how this year's goes, there's a good chance that he could see that before this season ends. And I know we're all hoping that happens. Because we get 4 more wins, things are looking pretty good for the Bulldogs.
Yeah, so you hope we can hit that number. Like we said, lots of work to do though. Continue getting better. We like some of the things we've been seeing. It's been encouraging, and we need to keep those things. Those same things we were talking about early in the season. About patience and potential, and all of those things. We still need to have those, but we're halfway now, so we need to, kick it up and keep developing and keep getting better. And if they keep getting better each week, I like the potential. I like where we could end up being at after week 10. So
yeah,
but it's 1 week at a time. This week's Penn Manor. Take care of business.
Absolutely. I completely agree. I endorse everything that Justin just said. So from us on game nights, make sure you like Wilson Bulldogs and Bulldog Hour fan pages on Facebook and follow us on Twitter and Instagram. We send out live game updates with photos. We do post-game interviews that we have on the next show that we do. And now I, along with another one of our Wilson West coaches and a Wilson football alum, Justin Burke, has been my videographer on the sideline, doing great job. If you watch the Facebook live streams of the games, he is the one controlling the camera there while I do the photos and Twitter account. So definitely thanks to Justin Burke on helping us out and helping me to bring all of the games to Facebook for all of you to watch. I know a lot of you are starting to spread the word about that and commenting and having a good time with each other watching the game, especially ones like this last week where it's not at Gurski.
Right, exactly. So, like Joey mentioned earlier in the show, if you like what you're getting, like and share on all those social media platforms, and that it's always appreciated.
Absolutely. But I think that's everything for us this week. Anything else to say?
No.
All right. So, Justin already mentioned it. Let's focus on Penn Manor and get that victory this week. We'll be back in 2 weeks, Sunday, October 15th, to recap weeks 6 and 7 and look ahead to weeks 8 and 9 against Manheim Township and Hempfield. So we hope you enjoyed this episode of the Bulldog Hour. For Justin Raffoff and the Wilson football program, I'm Joe Mays. And remember, go Bulldogs.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of the Bulldog Hour. Want more Wilson football? Follow the show on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Subscribe to the podcast on iTunes and SoundCloud. Or visit www.bulldoghour.com. The Bulldog Hour is a featured program on jmnjrradio.com.